The war had ended, but the scars it left would never heal. Across the vast stretches of the galaxy, the dust of battle still hung in the air, both in the form of physical wreckage and the emotional toll it had taken on the soldiers. The galactic war had been long and brutal. Humanity had fought against an alliance of alien races, the Zereth among them, and after years of bitter conflict, peace had finally arrived. Captain Derek Hart, a soldier of great renown, stood on the bridge of the Victory Star, staring out into the cold vastness of space. The stars, once a symbol of hope, now seemed distant and empty. The war was over, but there was no real celebration, only quiet relief, mixed with the haunting memories of what had been lost. Derek had fought in countless battles, led troops on desperate missions, and seen more death than he cared to remember. Now, in the aftermath, he found himself standing alone on the deck of the flagship, contemplating the cost of victory. It was in these quiet moments that the weight of war was felt most. The victory had come with a price, and for Derek, that price was heavy on his heart. "Captain Hart," a voice broke his reverie. Derek turned to see Commander Lucas, his trusted second-in-command, standing at attention. His expression was grim but respectful. "What is it, Commander?" Derek asked, his voice a low rumble. "We've received a message, sir, from the Council of the Zereth." Derek raised an eyebrow. The Zereth had been the enemy throughout the war, their species known for their intelligence and advanced technology. The humans had battled them for years, and now that the war was over, the thought of any communication from them felt unsettling. "Do they want to negotiate terms?" Derek asked dryly, already weary of diplomacy. "No, sir," Lucas replied. "It's a personal message for you, a gift of sorts." Derek frowned, puzzled. "A gift?" He stepped closer to the communication terminal as Lucas activated the message. A holographic image flickered to life before him, a delicate alien figure standing tall, her features regal yet filled with sadness. She wore elaborate robes, the colors shimmering like the stars, and her eyes, though beautiful, held a sorrowful depth. "Captain Derek Hart," the hologram began, her voice melodic yet tinged with regret. "I am Sorrel, emissary of the Zereth. In the wake of the war, we wish to extend our deepest apologies for the suffering caused by our people. To demonstrate our remorse and seek a path toward peace, we present to you a token of our goodwill." Derek's heart sank as Sorrel's image flickered for a moment, then steadied. "This is Lyra," she continued. "She is of our royal bloodline, once a diplomat and leader of our people. But in this new era, she will serve you. She is to be your personal companion, a gift to help mend the wounds of war and serve as a sign of our desire for peace." Derek stared at the image of Lyra. She was stunning, her skin glowing with an iridescent sheen, her eyes wide and full of an unspoken sadness. She did not speak, but her presence was undeniable, radiating a quiet power and grace. Yet Derek could not shake the uncomfortable feeling in his chest. A slave girl. A royal figure, reduced to a mere gift in the name of peace. The hologram flickered out, leaving Derek in silence. He was left staring at the empty space where the image had been moments before. His mind raced as his thoughts clashed with one another. The Zereth had surrendered, yes, but this was no simple gesture of goodwill. This was a political move, a way to show submission while still holding onto their pride. He turned to Lucas, who was watching him intently. "What do you make of it?" Derek asked. "I don't trust it, sir," Lucas replied cautiously. "It feels wrong, giving you an alien as a slave. After everything we've been through, it's more than just an apology." "I know," Derek said, his voice heavy with doubt. "But I don't have a choice, do I? This is an order from the higher-ups. I'll receive her, but I don't have to like it." The next day, Derek found himself standing in the grand hall of the Victory Star, awaiting the arrival of Lyra. The walls of the ship were adorned with banners and holograms celebrating the end of the war, but none of the celebrations felt real to Derek. He couldn't shake the unease in his stomach. Finally, The doors to the hall opened, and in walked Lyra. She was even more breathtaking in person. Her alien beauty was unlike anything Derek had ever seen, her skin shimmering like polished opal, with intricate patterns of light that seemed to shift as she moved. Her long, silver hair cascaded down her back, and her eyes that were a deep shade of violet, locked onto his with a mixture of defiance and sadness. She was a prisoner, but she held herself with the dignity of royalty. Derek fought the impulse to look away. He was her superior now, yet he couldn't deny the wave of guilt that washed over him. She was not a prisoner of war. She was a symbol of something darker, a pawn in a game of galactic politics. "Lyra," Derek said, his voice steady but unsure. "I am Captain Derek Hart. You are now under my command." Lyra said nothing, her expression unreadable. Derek noticed the faint tremor in her hands as she lowered her head in a slight bow, as if performing some act of subjugation. It struck him how broken she seemed, how much she carried in her eyes. I am not your enemy," Derek said, his words almost a whisper. "But I am not sure what to make of this." Lyra's gaze flickered, and for a brief moment Derek thought he saw something in her eyes, a glimmer of hope. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "I will be your servant, Captain," Lyra said, her voice soft but firm. "But I am not your enemy." Over the following days, Derek tried to adjust to the strange new reality. He kept his distance from Lyra, trying not to think too much about the implications of her presence. She followed him wherever he went, her movements silent and graceful. She would stand by him in meetings, observing quietly but never speaking unless spoken to. Her beauty and quiet demeanor were like a constant presence in his life now, yet he couldn't bring himself to fully embrace the idea of her as his gift. Lyra never complained, but Derek could see the sadness in her eyes every time he glanced at her. He couldn't imagine what it must feel like to be thrust into this new life, after everything she had known was taken away. She had once been a diplomat, a leader among her people, and now she was reduced to this, a possession, a symbol of the peace that had come at such a high cost. One evening, as they sat in the quiet of the ship's lounge, Derek finally spoke to her. "Tell me about your people, Lyra, the Xerath. What was it like before the war?" Lyra's eyes seemed to darken at the question. She hesitated for a moment before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "We were a proud people, Captain. We valued knowledge, culture, and the pursuit of peace. We were never meant to be warriors, but we fought because we had no choice. Our enemies took everything from us, and in the end, we were forced to do what we had to." Derek nodded slowly, trying to understand. "But you're still here, you're still alive." "Yes," Lyra said, her gaze far away. "But for what? What do I have left now? My people are scattered, broken. The war destroyed everything we held dear." "I can't change what's happened," Derek said quietly, "but I can help you rebuild. You don't have to be a slave. You're free to leave whenever you wish." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and sadness. "I am not free, Captain. Not anymore." The days turned into weeks, and Derek found himself in a complicated relationship with Lyra. He treated her with respect, but he could sense the walls she had built around herself. She no longer seemed like a slave, but someone who had been stripped of everything she had known. Her silence spoke volumes, and Derek began to feel a deep sense of guilt every time he looked at her. The war had changed everything, and now, in the silence of peace, Derek was faced with the consequences of victory. He couldn't undo the damage that had been done, but he could choose how to move forward. And as he looked at Lyra, he knew that the road ahead would not be easy for either of them. The days that followed Derek Hart's introduction to Lyra were filled with an uneasy tension. He had hoped the passage of time would make things easier, but instead, it only seemed to highlight the vast chasm between them. Lyra, the beautiful alien gift presented to him by the Xerath, remained a quiet, almost distant presence. She was always there, standing by his side during briefings and discussions, observing and learning without a single word of complaint. But Derek could never fully ignore the fact that she was not truly free. The weight of her servitude hung heavily between them. Derek, for his part, tried to maintain a distance. He had been a soldier for most of his life, and soldiers didn't get involved with people, especially not in the way that seemed to be expected of him. He wasn't sure how to treat her. Should he keep her at arm's length, as a symbol of the Zirith submission? Or should he allow himself to get closer, to see her not as a gift but as a person in need of understanding? But Lyra was not an easy person to ignore. The more time Derek spent with her, the more he realized how little he truly knew about her. Her silence, though deep and brooding, was not that of a typical servant. It was the silence of someone who had once been powerful, someone who had been brought low by forces beyond her control. He would catch glimpses of that power, like the way her eyes seemed to gleam with hidden knowledge whenever she read a report or analyzed a situation, or the way she could move with an effortless grace that was so unlike the other slaves Derek had seen in his career. And then there were the moments when their eyes met, when Lyra would catch him looking at her, and for just a heartbeat there would be a flicker of something in her eyes. Fear, sadness, or was it something else? It was hard for Derek to tell. She never spoke of her past, but her expressions, her body language, told him that there was so much more to her than he could understand. One evening, after a particularly grueling mission debriefing, Derek found himself in the mess hall, sitting at a table alone, staring into his drink. The silence of the room around him made everything feel more amplified. The clinking of utensils, the low murmur of voices, the distant hum of the ship's engines. It was a far cry from the battlefields he had grown accustomed to. "Captain Hart," Lyra's voice was soft, almost tentative, but it broke through the quiet hum of the mess hall like a warm breeze. Derek looked up to see her standing a few steps away, her hands clasped in front of her, her gaze fixed on him. She had grown accustomed to the routine, but it was clear that she still struggled to understand her place in this new world. "What is it, Lyra?" Derek asked, his tone weary but gentle. I brought you something," she said, stepping closer, a small, metallic object in her hand. She placed it on the table before him, a pendant of sorts, glinting in the light. It was beautifully crafted, shaped like a star with intricate, flowing patterns. Derek stared at it, confused. "I don't understand," he said, his brow furrowed. "What is this?" Lyra hesitated before answering. "It is a symbol of my people. It represents the peace we once sought. I thought, perhaps you could wear it. To remind you that not all of us wanted the war." Derek's heart clenched at her words. She was offering him something so deeply personal, yet in that moment he realized how much she had lost. The Zirith had been a proud, noble race, and now they were scattered, broken, their people enslaved or in hiding. And here she was, offering him a token of peace, despite the chains that bound her. "I can't accept this," Derek said quietly, pushing the pendant back toward her. "Not until I understand more about you, about your people." Lyra's gaze softened, but there was no anger in her eyes, only a deep sadness. "Perhaps you never will," she said, "but that doesn't mean you can't try." As the days turned into weeks, Derek found himself thinking more and more about Lyra and the world she had come from. She was different from the other alien slaves he had seen. There was a quiet dignity in her that made her stand out. She wasn't like the others who had been defeated on the battlefield, forced to serve their conquerors. No, Lyra had been a diplomat, a leader in her own right. She had once held power and respect among her people, and now she was here, a mere token of the galaxy's politics. Derek began to see that there was more to Lyra than he had initially believed. In their private conversations, which were few and far between, she spoke not of war or slavery, but of the culture of the Zirith, their love of art, philosophy, and knowledge. She spoke of their cities, grand and beautiful, built with technology far beyond humanity's. But there was always an edge to her words, a quiet pain that came when she mentioned the fall of her people. "The war took everything from us," she said one night as they stood in the observation deck, gazing out into the infinite expanse of space. "Our homes, our family, our way of life, it's all gone now. We are nothing." Derek's heart broke at her words, and for the first time he saw her not as a symbol of political maneuvering, but as a person who had lost everything, just as he had. The war had taken something from him, too. His innocence, his sense of right and wrong, the man he had been before the first battle. "You are not nothing, Lyra," Derek said softly. "You are still here. You are still alive." She turned to him, her eyes filled with something he couldn't place. Hope, fear, maybe both. "But what is life if you have lost everything? What is the point of living when there's nothing left to live for?" "I don't know," Derek admitted, his voice low. "I don't know what the point is anymore, but I do know this: you don't have to face it alone. Not anymore." Lyra looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time she seemed to soften. The walls she had built around herself cracked just slightly. "I don't know if I can trust you, Captain," she said quietly, "but I'm willing to try." As the weeks continued, Derek and Lyra's relationship began to shift. There was no sudden change, no dramatic moment when everything became clear. Instead, it was a slow, steady unfolding. They began to speak more freely, sharing their thoughts and fears, their doubts and hopes. They still kept their distance. After all, Lyra was a slave and Derek was her master, whether they wanted to acknowledge it or not. But in the quiet moments, when the weight of the galaxy seemed to lift, there was a connection between them that neither could deny. One evening, as they sat in the lounge, Derek leaned back in his chair, watching Lyra as she carefully examined a datapad filled with historical records of the Zereth. She was so absorbed in it that she didn't notice him staring at her. There was a quiet strength in her, a resilience that had survived the worst the galaxy had to offer. "Why didn't you fight back when they came for you?" Derek asked, his voice low. Lyra looked up from the datapad, her eyes meeting his. "I did fight," she said softly. "But when your people were at our doorstep, there was no more room for fighting. The Zereth were not meant to be warriors. We believed in peace, in knowledge. We thought that would be enough, but it was." Derek nodded, understanding more than she knew. "I understand. I thought the same thing once. That peace was something we could achieve with words, but sometimes words are not enough." Lyra's eyes softened as she lowered the datapad. "And sometimes you have to fight for peace, even if it costs you everything." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken truths. Derek had been a soldier for so long, fighting battles without fully understanding what he was fighting for. But in this moment, with Lyra sitting across from him, he felt a new sense of purpose stirring within him. Maybe, just maybe, there was still hope for peace, and maybe together they could find it. As Derek and Lyra continued to navigate their shared world aboard the Victory Star, the bond between them grew, shaped by understanding and shared loss. Derek knew that his feelings for Lyra were complicated. She was not just a slave. She was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had lived through the unimaginable and was still standing. And as for Lyra, she had begun to see something in Derek that she had long since lost faith in: the capacity for kindness, for change, for redemption. Perhaps, she thought, she hadn't lost everything after all. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers and obstacles neither of them could foresee. But for the first time since the war began, Derek felt as if he wasn't alone in the universe.